Right. I just shared the PR that I submitted with the changes that are there. I shared that on Telegram as well. I hope you all had a chance to take a look at it, and if you had any comments, I'd be happy to address them. Um, However, I had some questions around, a few points that I made out for us to clarify during this call. The first one, I believe, was to do with the state. Uh, have we, what do each bundler participating in the network store as a state? Um, is this something, how do I say, in consensus clients, they maintain the current block proposer number, the epoch number, and use that to either connect or disconnect from a particular node. In the case of the bundler network, how do we determine whether whether you ought to connect with a particular peer or not? One of the criteria happens to be whether the peer supports the necessary mempool ID that we are connected to, or we are supporting as well. So, are we planning to maintain some kind of state at within each node, or
I'm trying to think whether it's part of the protocol. Is it something that we should decide? Like, a bundler might connect to a specific endpoint it likes to talk with. It can search for everyone and connect to them all. That I'm trying to understand if it's part of the protocol to define that.
I thought Yov's requirement was to publicize the list of mempool IDs that each bundler actually supports. So if we were to store this as a part of the state or the metadata associated with each node, it would be easier for other nodes that are participating in network to either choose or disconnect from a particular peer, or only connect to a subnet of peers that it wishes to connect to.
Yeah, I think nodes should advertise they should advertise which mempools they support. This is useful information for other nodes, but I'm not sure if this is this what you meant by state that each of them would be holding?
Yeah, for example, the ENR record associated with the consensus client stores the list of, the current epoch that it supports and few other things. But I thought when you define the ENR for the bundler, we can specify the mempool IDs that each bundler would support, and probably use that to pass this metadata when a node queries further metadata about a particular bundler node. Have I explained that clearly, or does anybody have any question?
I understand. So by state, you're not talking about some internal state it holds, but about what the ENR what the ENR record contains.
One of it is the ENR. The other is, for example, bundlers can leave and join the network at any point of time. How would a bundler know that it has received the latest set of user ops? Because there could be a scenario where the bundler could start propagating a user op which was already processed or included into the blockchain.
So this one, since the op is no longer valid, it would get kicked out by other nodes as and it would get kicked out because it is spamming. So the time when you propagate a certain user op is when it's valid. It must be valid, and you also include the block number, the block hash against it, which it was verified. So other nodes are going to ignore. If it's an old block, whether it was valid or not, but it's an old block, they are going to ignore it. They're not going. So even if it gets propagated, it just silently gets dropped. And if it's a recent block, but it's no longer valid, then it would actually get blocked by other nodes. So
the short end is that every bundler, when you get a user operation, the first thing you need to implement is check whether it is already on chain. Either you keep a hash in memory or a block number or somehow, because it is invalid if it is already on chain.
Right.
So it is your job to not publicize it to other bundlers for your own sake, and you should have actually dropped it when you received it in the first place.
Wait, but Dror, I think we are making an implicit decision here, so we should make it explicit and decide whether we want to make it. Because what I meant is that it's the validity check, and my assumption is that if the transaction was already included, then it will be invalid because the validation check will fail. But we know this doesn't have to be the case, because a wallet could, for whatever reason, implement a validate user of that allows replay. It would be a very bad idea, but it could happen. So if we are mandating that bundlers should only accept user operation if they check and it's not already on chain, it means that we prevent replay at that level. And otherwise, if it's only based on a validity check, then if a certain account wants to allow replay under certain conditions, then it can do so. Now, the reason I'm asking if we want to make it explicit or not is that this came up in a discussion with Starkware.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So with Starknet, because Starknet had an issue with it. They are using a variation of ERC 4337. And I hope that they will switch to the real thing. But one problem they had with it is that in ERC 4337 it is possible to have on-chain multiple instances of an identical user op, and in their network it's not possible because of the way the network is constructed. So
yeah, look, unique. I think that unique user op is generally a very good thing. The question is whether we could either allow it or deprecate it, because right now we don't have any mechanism to validate that the uniqueness of user ops. It is left to the account to decide how to do uniqueness, and we don't check it, and it's going to be very expensive for the entry point to check it. I still think we are we have a very strong should not reuse the same transaction. Replay is never a good thing. And the nonce is there to signify the fact that at the minimum you should modify it some way if you have the same transaction, and you should do. But yes, the way it is right now, it's best effort. There is no centralized mechanism to enforce unique transaction. It will be very expensive for us to add it.
No, we are not going to enforce it on chain because wasting storage on it is just a waste. But on the other hand, having it requiring the bundlers as an explicit requirement to verify it is also a lot of work. They need to check the entire history to see if there was.
Yes, but I think we should specify actually also in the AP that it is expected that transactions are unique, and bundlers will check uniqueness within a reasonable time span. A reasonable time span is time span that is enough to handle network splits, if ever there are, or time gaps in the network, in handling network, like several blocks into the past. After that, it is assumed that it is a
new transaction altogether.
Yeah, it makes sense because it's really more of an optimization for bundlers, so they don't need to run simulations for something that already happened on chain recently due to a split, like to a short-term network split. So yes, it makes sense to check for inclusion for a recent.
Yes, I'd say something like in the past 100 or 256. It is a big number, but it is small enough. In the last 256 blocks, the user operation, the hash has to be unique. Why this number? It is enough. I don't want to run the entire network, and for a simple bundler, it would be a query for logs, which is possible to do in this range. We expect it to be globally unique.
Yeah, we expect it to be unique, but I'm not sure we want to. I'm not sure we need to enforce or to define any specific number, whether it's 100 or 256, because first of all, as you said, on different networks, it's going to be different. Like on Polygon, you have much faster blocks, for example, and it's also, since it's an optimization, it's an internal optimization in the bundler. It's it's the bundler protecting itself from doing excessive work. So it can be left to each bundler to decide how.
Yes. What I'm saying, it has to be unique. It is not enforced on chain, and we expect a bundler to check the uniqueness at least until, I don't know, finality of the network. Some network dependent back history.
Right. So
something that is comfortable to hold in memory.
Right. So we are not looking at the creation of another Merkle tree within each bundler to maintain the state in any way. It's
no. I don't care how. For me,
okay.
When a bundler, let's say when a bundler starts, let's say he should read the network for this cached window, and prevent replay in that range.
Right.
And it should be big enough so that any transient in mempool user operation will still fit there. Because we said something like user operation can stay up to 10 blocks, I believe. Remember, do we have, Yoav, do we have a limit on how much time a user can be in a mempool?
No, I don't think so. We only if it's throttled. I think if I recall correctly, the throttling does define 10 blocks or something like this. But otherwise, if there is no throttled entity involved, like a paymaster that has been throttled,
then it is okay, because
there is no limit.
Because during this time, you probably, as long as you know about his user operation, you will want to know that its uniqueness. So trying to think.
You mean if it is still in the mempool and it hasn't been included on chain, then there's no problem. And in order for it to be identical, it would have the same sender, and we only allow one op per sender. So it's not going to be accepted anyway. We're not going to see the same user operation twice in the same mempool.
Yes. Okay, so the bottom line is just what is missing is a clarification, actually not the protocol, but more in the EAP, that the user operation hash should be unique.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can say, but it's not enforced. It's expected from accounts, because if it's not unique, it probably means that the account is shooting itself in the foot.
Right. So we are not making it explicit. It's just implicitly assumed that each bundler will handle the validation to ensure uniqueness of the user operation.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's good practice for bundlers. So we could say each bundler can figure it out on its own, or we could write it somewhere. Or if we want to be stricter about it, we could even add it to the test suite. Have a test to see that it's not simulated by creating. Right. For the test, we could create an account that accepts replay and attempt to send it within one block, to send it again, and see that it's rejected based on that, and not based on it being conflicting with an existing one.
Right. I mean, I'm just trying to understand if there's a valid use case, for a replay. I mean, on chain, I understand that I'm just resubmitting a transaction with a higher gas fee, but on a user operation level, I can't think of a valid use case of a replay.
So it's I can think of one, but it still seems like a bad idea, because it's not the replace by fee, because if you change the gas, then it's not
Change
identical.
the hash.
Yeah, it changes the hash. So it's only if it is absolutely identical, it is the same hash. And in this case, it's so in this case, if there is a signature and a nonce check, if there is replay protection, then there is no valid use case. But for example, let's say I mean, one use case that I like is automation by having something like a cron job. Let's say you have a cron, you implement a cron functionality in your account, saying that you want something to happen every hour, once, like every hour or every day. And then anyone can, and you don't check for a signature because it triggers something that just looks at a queue of transactions and perform them. So anyone can trigger it. You don't even need a signature. In this case, you could reuse the same. You could just reuse the same operation every day without having to generate it twice. But it seems like a bad idea. It would be better to generate a new one that
new user.
Yes, and also you could be spammed by even if you specify a time range. Many times it can be put on chain with the same transaction. So it's gonna be at the same transaction. You cannot limit exactly once, which is what you want. So, so
exactly.
we don't support non-unique items.
Yeah, so I mean, even in this case, it would make sense to have it would make sense to have a nonce, to have a replay protection even for such calls, because otherwise someone might try to front run you if to get compensated, and the call ends up getting executed more than once. So, and even if it's reverted, but you still pay for the gas because it doesn't happen in validation. Oh yeah, so I think replay.
So we agreed on that. Okay.
Yeah, so replay is always a bad idea.
All right. So then we are saying at the metadata level for each node, we'll just be storing the the mempool IDs, and that's it. Apart from the regular, that is the port, the IP address on which they're listening. I believe there was something else that was expected on consensus. I need to go back and look at that definition. Probably I'll update the spec, and then you all can comment on to see if there's anything else that we might have to add. The second question I had was in our last call, we agreed that the mempool ID would be a unique hash from IPFS of a JSON file. My question, though, was should we make this deterministic, or rather, using the hash, would we be able to determine the underlying properties of the mempool, like which chain, what entry point contract it represents?
I'm not sure how formalistic we want it to be, because we need it to be unique. And we need some way for the bundler owners, the people, not the code, to be able to decode somehow what this mempool ID means. And using IPFS hash give us this information, because a human will be able to open this document and see what it says. I don't think we should formalize it more. Maybe in the future, it will become not a text file, but a JSON file. Okay. Yeah. When we get there, right now we say it is unique, and we say it will be the IPFS hash of the document describing this pool.
Right. So we're
not saying anything about what it means. Maybe in the future we will make it a JSON file, but I'm not sure we need to.
I mean, if we can, probably as the initial version, we just define a couple of, the JSON structure and use that itself. And bundlers can verify or get more information by just looking up, reading that particular JSON file from the IPFS hash and determine the any information that they wish to.
Yes, but I'm not sure that it could be fully. We can define the JSON, what it means a custom mempool. Yeah. A custom mempool might mean whitelisting X and that. It might mean some parameters need to be different. I don't even know what it means.
Right. Yeah.
It might mean different code in the bundler, different logic to do validation or not do validation. I cannot explain what it is because it is an open-ended issue. It's not something we know all the version we need.
Right. Yeah. I
So
mean,
when we know, we'll structure this file.
yeah. So
we don't need to do it right now.
Yeah, I mean, we may or may not be able to define it well in the future, but certainly we don't know how to do it right now. It could be just a human-readable text file that defines certain aspects. There's some information should be included, such as the chain and the mempool, such as the chain and the such as the chain and the entry point. But everything else could be it may not necessarily be defined. For example, let's say it supports a new kind of aggregation, and a new kind of aggregation that requires the bundler to have some code, to have some implementation. We're not going to have this implementation within this text file. So it will just mean that bundlers that implemented this code, this off-chain aggregation code, should participate in this mempool. So it's so it has to be read by a human and to determine whether whether to participate with this in this mempool.
Right. My thinking here was that given a mempool ID, how would a bundler be aware to which particular chain or entry point contract should the particular user operation be submitted to? Would we be able to allow, or are we looking for bundlers to determine this programmatically?
But they determine it programmatically, but not from the text file, not from the JSON file. In the JSON, because I mean, there will be some exceptions. I think I wrote a pseudocode for an algorithm back then in the group, I remember. But the idea is that there's a list of rules that apply in each such mempool, and when you simulate a user op, when you receive a user op and you simulate to decide where to propagate it, you check if it's which rules which normal rules it violates, which exceptions it triggers, and then you propagate it to every mempool where the rules match.
All right.
Yoav, what bothers me is that we are now defining too much. We're making too much work to define the alternate mempool. I want to have a definition and something that works with the standard mempool, with rough guidelines of, let's say, whitelisting for alternate mempools, because there can be many other things that can be done, but not sure that we want to standardize them.
We don't need to standardize them, but we do need to decide how things get propagated. So that's, then we might not even need to implement all of it right away. It's fine. It's more important that we have bundlers implementing the canonical mempool first.
Exactly. That's why.
So we are talking about protocol.
When you say canonical, you're referring specifically to Ethereum mainnet, right? But we are trying to make this chain agnostic.
No. The reference. The primary mempool on every chain has, at the minimum, the chain ID and the stake, the minimum stake that is required. Because this is the basic parameter that we know will change between network. There is stake time, but we decided that stake time will be 24 hours. So it is dynamic parameters, but we said that 24 hours sounds like a good value to use.
And stake time, stake size, chain ID. Entry.
Yes. So in the chain ID, we want it to be it's constant because this is the latest version that we have. So we have the current chain ID and the current entry point. The time is 24 hours. So the stake value, this is something that will change between networks. So yes, the mempool ID will define that. So we will have a reasonable value for all the foreseeable chains that we can think of, and put it in this document. Yes, if some other chain join the party, they will have to define in a sense, they can't use that mempool ID because they can, but even the document will not be able to specify the stake value of this chain.
Right. So,
but I believe not so many networks will be added that way.
No, I think I think the chain ID should always be inside it. So this way the mempool ID is always different. But just to define, since you asked what do I mean by canonical mempool, so when I say canonical, I'm not talking about a specific network like Ethereum mainnet. I'm saying that each network has exactly one canonical mempool, and it is defined by not having any exceptions to the rules. It's the mempool. It's the one that passes the test, that implements everything that is defined in the EIP with no exceptions. And then the non-canonical ones are ones that made exceptions to the rule or change the parameter.
Right. So this is again under the assumption that we'll have the same entry point contract address on all the networks that would support this EIP, right? That will make it simpler. Then the only variables there would be the chain ID, the stake amount, and the time that you were talking of.
Actually, I think that the entry point should be there. We hope that it will have the same address everywhere, but in some cases, like for example, during an upgrade, during an upgrade, you still have
Avalanche,
point. Yeah, you have the old entry point, and you have the new entry point, and both of them are valid for a while. You want to support them as two separate mempools, but it must be separate mempools because the user ops for one of them cannot be included in the other. The entry point is hashed into the user op as part of the signature check. So yes, so I think that the entry point, it should be mandatory that the entry point address is reflected in this JSON file.
Okay. So I think I made a note of these points that I mean the fields that you want to be included to the JSON. I'll include that in the spec, and you can review. Yov, can I request you to resend the pseudocode you were referring to earlier? That will be helpful just for my understanding for the validation. I don't know in which group you shared. If I can find, I'll ask you. If not,
I will try to. I'll try to find it in the group.
Right. Sounds good. So the other question I had was in peer discovery, are we going to specify the rules or for a particular node to either disconnect or connect from a peer? The only thing is continuous resending of old or invalid user ops. Is this going to be the only mandated validation, or are we going to specify any other rules?
Wait, I didn't quite understand.
I mean, in the consensus client spec, they have a set of rules which each consensus client have to follow to either connect or disconnect from a connected peer. One of these is whether the epoch matches or the forked digest value match or not. In our case, the only criteria for a disconnection request would be if the connected peer spams invalid user ops continuously. So are we saying more than 10, say, just a number that has popped out of my head, 10 user ops which are already processed as being sent by a peer, then we just disconnect from it.
So it's a different definition of spam. We have two kinds of spam here. One kind of spam is when they send you an operation that you deem to be invalid, and they said it's invalid. In this case, you only need one. You already know that it's not compliant, that it doesn't play by the same rules, because there is no possible way for it to be a mistake. It's it's supposed to run the same validation. It ran it, returned true, and for you it returned false. So you can disconnect immediately. You don't need to wait for 10 times. But the other kind of spam that I think you're referring to is that a node is a bit out of sync with the network, so it sends you operations that were already included. And for this one, we can have tolerate a lot more because it doesn't cost the bundler. I mean, first of all, it can happen by mistake. It will happen in network splits, and second, it's very cheap to handle this. Because you keep a short-term mapping of the of recently included ops, so you can drop it without simulation. So I think that we can. So it's okay to get quite a lot of them. It can be more than 10, because 10. If there was a network split, then it's expected that this number will be a lot higher than 10. If it accumulated a lot of ops that were included. So for the second kind of spam, the one that can happen legitimately, I would accept a higher number. I don't know.
And my suggestion is everything that we can redefine in terms of the transactions and for normal nodes, we should use whatever is used by normal node, because user op is a transaction. How does a node handle a spam of many transactions coming from another node?
Megabytes. The rule is 10 megabytes, if I recall correctly, right? If I recall correctly, by default, Geth has a parameter for it, but I believe it accepts up to one packet when they define a data packet to be a maximum of 10 megabytes.
Yeah.
So for this kind of spam, I agree. We should use the same rule. The only case where we have a different rule is for invalid. For when we receive something that is invalid against the same block, the block hash that was included.
Okay.
And also back to the original question, I think if a peer sends you user operations that are not part of the negotiated mempool ID, it should also be dropped.
So this is where, a given node, a given bundler can support multiple mempool IDs, right?
Yeah.
When in Gossip Sub, data is shared as it is to all the connected nodes. So there might be some cases where you might receive a particular user op which is not relevant to the pool that you are supporting. So it would be quite harsh if we were to drop the peer in such cases, because you would still be receiving valid user operation for the canonical mempool from that connected node.
But it shouldn't. It shouldn't. It's supposed to be a response to a request, right? You are requesting user ops for a particular chain ID, if I recall correctly, right?
I think
that is in request response, but in the global topic, I believe you just start pushing everything. So there are two categories of messaging in the P2P, right? The first is the global one where we continue to push new user operations received by the bundler to all the connected peers. The other is publishing a list of user op hashes, and then you let the nodes decide which hashes they can request specifically, and that is then sent out to them as a separate response.
Yeah, but the subscribe call can also have parameters, and I think last time we decided that if you subscribe to something, the parameters would be the mempool IDs that you're interested in.
Yeah,
once you do that, you shouldn't receive invalid transactions. User ops, sorry.
Right. I haven't included that as a part of the protocol yet. I'll have to take a look at where I could add that.
You can look at the attestations, for example, attestations in consensus networking. They also take a subnet ID of a specific subnet, and then all of those attestations get sent to you, so we can reuse that pattern.
Okay, I've renamed attestations as mempools there, and because that was the most relevant I could think of. So probably mempool IDs could be one of the criteria for subscription. So yeah, I'll relook at that option. And
yes, we already said that we subscribe for specific mempools.
Sorry, Dror, I didn't catch that.
I understood that already subscribe by mempool ID. This ID wasn't it the case?
Yeah, we did agree on that, but I didn't know how to. I mean, I've not yet included it as a part of the specification. I don't know. I'll have to relook at the spec to see where I can add that. Just a moment. I'm looking at the specification that I have.
No, the specification was actually we should merge the specifications because right now it's a framework. Now we're starting adding some meat to it. One of them is what are the topic IDs that we subscribe to, and
yeah, I mentioned.
I think that they should be derived from mempool ID or our mempool IDs.
Yeah, makes sense.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Dror? I lost your. I mean, due to internet connection. What did you say?
What I'm saying is that the spec right now, it's a framework of a spec of how we use Gossip for that. Now we are going into the details, like the actual format. One of them is how do we subscribe, what we subscribe for. And the way I understand it, not from the document, but what we think I need to subscribe to specific mempool IDs. And the way to do it is that the ID, the subscription ID will be the mempool ID.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So I don't know if the protocol advertise what other nodes subscribe to X. Maybe it doesn't because it's secured. So we might have a global channel where I broadcast my preferences, and separately I will subscribe to them because I want to get a user operation and put to them.
Okay. So that's another thing that I need to include to the spec. I'll get that done and I'll pass it along as soon as it's ready. So on the list of topics that I have defined till now, do you have any comments or suggestions on what additional information should be included there?
So I'm wondering if we should only include that data that is going to be shared between bundlers, or should we include in the spec also in the mempool spec data that we think should be included but should be used only locally by the bundler? For example, the reputations that we think are probably a must for any bundler in order to prevent any attack on it. So do you think it should be included in this spec, or is it out of the scope of it? Did you hear me? Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm trying to think. Again, can you repeat that?
Okay, so right now we only talked about data that is going to be shared between bundlers, for example, the user operations on the end or the entry points, but data that is going to be used only locally by the bundler, not shared between bundlers. But we think that it's also important as it's also part of the EAP. Should it be on this spec as well? For example, the reputations or code hashes or stuff like that?
This is, I don't know, this is the spec of the protocol. The idea is that if the protocol broadcasts the things to all, then all entities that receive it will behave the same. The data, if the reputation is parameterized, yes, these parameters are part of the definition of the mempool. If we decide that we use different,
yes, exactly.
I don't know, factor, yes. Again, that's why I left it open, the definition of the file, and not try to define all the fields there, because things that are constant in the EAP, you don't need to specify them because they are implicitly defined for this mempool.
Yeah, and just to just to clarify, it's not. We are not talking about communicating the reputation between bundlers, because they should not. It's completely local, and bundlers have no reason to trust the reputation from other bundlers. So this is local. What we're talking about is the parameters of the reputation algorithm. If some mempool decides to tweak them, so this can be a part of the JSON file. So that's what you meant, right, Shahaf? It's about part of the JSON
Yeah,
file.
because it also defines the mempool that is currently being used, no? Or it might define it.
No, it might define, but remember that it's that the reputation cannot break different implementations of the reputation system will not break the mempool. It's okay if a certain bundler implements it to be differently, then maybe it will silently drop certain operations that others would consider, but it would not cause it to split away from the mempool and consider anyone to be a spammer, because it's a local implementation. It's not doesn't affect validity. It's not considered invalid if something is not included due to bad reputation. So I would put it in the text as a hint, in the JSON file, in the free form part of it. I think the JSON will have a mandatory part which includes the chain ID, the entry point, and so on. And then it has the free form part that defines the exceptions. So in this part, in the free form part, it could also define things about the reputation system, or even an alternative method of protecting the mempool if they want to use something different. But this is it's not enforced. It doesn't break the mempool if someone disregards this part.
So when Shahaf was referring to reputation, he wasn't referring to the reputation of the node or the bundler that's connected. Right.
No,
Okay.
it's a reputation.
No.
Sorry,
yeah.
go on.
Oh, go on. You can explain it. It's reputations of entities that are currently tracked by the and specifically the configuration of the reputation.
Yeah, I think the term reputation is ambiguous on this call, because in peer-to-peer networks you also have reputation of nodes, which you and if a node and if a node spammed you, then you reduce its reputation. So this is not the reputation we mean. We mean reputation in the ERC 4337 sense. There is a section that defines a reputation algorithm implemented by the bundler in order to protect itself against malicious paymasters, for example, malicious contracts of any kind that are staked and therefore allowed to perform certain operations that could put the bundler at risk of denial of service. So there is a reputation algorithm, and it's completely local to each bundler. It's a way for the bundler to protect itself. All right.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was in mute. Sorry. Yeah, noted. That makes sense. Thanks, Yoav. In the structures, the data structure that we have for the list already defined, are we happy with, say, the first one, user operation with entry point? I believe you had a question looking at the PR. I believe Yoav or Dror had a question on that. It was, yeah, I think the first one has been addressed, that we say that the mempool IDs will now be defined as a part of the metadata. So that can be taken care of. But my question was on, is there any field that you feel is redundant or after today's discussion that I would need to change? Chain ID verified at block hash and entry point contract. But given that, is there a, sorry, I think we agreed that there is a possibility of having a new canonical entry point contract if there's a new deployment of the same contract. So that's fine. So any questions on or anything else that I would have to change here, or are we happy with what is already provided there?
I think it covers it, but let's see what everyone thinks. And I don't see anything missing or redundant. But what about everyone here?
I still have to look it over, but I will do that as soon as possible.
All right. You want me to paste the to paste the PR in the group, or do you have it?
It's already pasted in the group.
Oh, right.
Thanks.
I'll wait for all of your comments before I proceed to make any changes there if required. And I presume the second one, which is the hash of pooled user op hash, is the regular SHA-256 hash, or are we looking at a different hash?
No, it's cool, but
yeah.
Okay.
We are AVM networks.
All right, cool. So these two are fine, and I've stuck to the same definition that we have in consensus client on the number of requests that can be sent as a batch, which is 256, I believe. And I've also, in terms of response timeout and the time of first byte out, stuck to the same things that are present in the consensus client. In terms of validation to whether accept or reject a particular user hash, I think we'd have to, we just spoke about it in this call, which I believe is in line 176 on the spec. For a given entry point, I think we have to validate to see if the block hash is invalid, or if the simulation fails, reject both the client and reject the user op. Otherwise, you can add it to your local mempool. Is there any other validation we need to add there?
I don't think so. I think that's and if it passes validation, if it passes validation, but not that it might actually perform two validations. So I'll go through the validation rules again for a bundler. So when the bundler receives the user operation, it checks, first of all, it checks whether the block, the user op came with a certain block hash. It checks whether it's a very recent block hash or not. If it's an old block hash, like not one of the last 2 or 3 blocks, something like that, if it's not very recent, you can drop the user operation. It's not interesting. Now, if it's an interesting one, if it's a recent one, then there is the question of whether it's the last one or maybe the one before that. If it's the last, so you simulate it against the last one. If it's valid against the latest block, that's great, and you can propagate it with this and consider it for inclusion. If it's not valid against the latest block, then you still run one more simulation, this time against the block hash that came with it, where it was supposed to be valid. You run this check in order to see whether you are getting spammed. So if this simulation also fails, then you consider the sender to be a spammer, and you disconnect it. If it was valid at that block, but it's not valid in the current one, then it's not spam. Then you drop it silently because it's no longer valid, but you don't disconnect the peer. Make sense?
Yep, it does. Sorry, go on.
I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the pull request, and so I see that I see you tagged me on the question regarding the metadata. So when you asked if we can include the list of mempool IDs supported by to be part of the metadata. So by metadata, where is it broadcasted?
It's just a moment. I'll refer to the. I think we just agreed that we'll add it to the part of the metadata. It is defined in section or line number 106, where each bundler must hold the metadata locally, which is a sequence number and a bundler subnet that the particular bundler would support.
Awesome.
So the list of mempool IDs it would support.
So this is queried using the get metadata message, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's fine. In that case, then yes, we can have the list of mempool IDs in get metadata and use that.
I also I want to add that if we're going to use ENR for our identities, you can also encode metadata inside of the ENR, inside of your node identity. So that's also a possibility in order to like reduce the amount of round trips you need for getting metadata about a certain node.
Yeah, I think that's included in section, sorry, I don't remember where, towards the end where I defined the ENR. I've not specified the structure or defined the data structure of the ENR here, but now that we've agreed on that, I think, 538, where we talk about the mempool bit field, that specifies a list of mempools a particular bundler would support.
But
Right,
is it
okay.
is it okay for ENR not to have a fixed size, because the list of mempools is not bound, So
Yeah, but ENR is a list of optional parameters, so I believe it
yes,
can be dynamic in size.
okay, so yeah, so it's fine. Because it might conflict with the idea, with an idea that I suggested one of the groups, but I'm not sure we want to even use that. I suggested that maybe to add the ENR of the bundler optionally to the call data of the bundle, so that we don't need boot nodes. We don't need to talk to boot nodes to join the network. You can just find ENR. You can find an ENR on chain. So the chain itself serves as a boot node in order to join, in order to find other nodes to talk to. But if the ENR becomes very very big, then it's going to be gas inefficient, and then bundlers won't include it. But I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm not sure we're even going to implement this or not. So I don't know if this should be a concern.
Right. I mean, should we make a note of it right now for future discussion, or just revisit it later?
Yeah, I wanted to hear everyone's opinion on whether you consider this to be valuable, to have information about the node such as the ENR as part of the bundle. So to use the chain as the source of for a bootstrap.
I think it's a good idea, and I wonder why like the traditional the Ethereum discovery protocol doesn't do that actually.
Actually, you don't have to put the full ENR if you support again IPFS. You could put just an ID, and then say and tell people to go look for these nodes.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Maybe So instead of putting the whole ENR, they're going to use IPFS anyway, so they should put, so each bundler can pin its own ENR somewhere in IPFS and point to that.
And then what you're saying, that boot nodes are the list of the node that were active in the past.
We're still going
to bundles.
But there would still be discovery issues, right? If we are going to, because nodes can join and disconnect at any time. If there is no, if they're not stable, then treating them as a boot node for yours could lead to a delayed discovery of connected peers.
No, it's an additional protection. We're going to have boot nodes just like any other peer-to-peer network.
Right. Okay.
But we are using but since we have something that others don't, normal peer-to-peer networks don't have another source of truth, so they must rely solely on boot nodes. but we have something else. We have a contract on a blockchain that we can refer to. So I'm using it as an additional method. And even if most of let's say there are many bundlers that have a high churn, or maybe they are even spamming, they are putting incorrect data in this field, it's still fine because when a bundler looks for nodes, it will take, let's say, the last 10 bundles, the last any number of bundles, and it will look for, and it will try to use them to bootstrap. So it's okay. So even if many of them are bad, it just needs to find one valid bundle.
Right.
So it just helps with the bootstrap if something is wrong with the boot node.
Right.
So it's an extra protection that most peer-to-peer networks don't have, but we could have it.
One thing about putting ENRs on chain, though, is that it can actually, if there's a lot of churn on the network, it can grow indefinitely. So maybe there should be like some sort of expiry field there.
So no, it's not kept in storage. We don't do anything with it. It's like in a rollup, you don't you put it in call data, but you don't refer to it. So the entry point doesn't it doesn't become a parameter in handle ops that the handle op function actually does something.
Actually, by the way, 4844, does it add
I see.
Data to existing transactions, or are they separate transactions? Because we could have put it there instead of paying it full gas for being a call data.
Right. It could. We could use 4844 when it's included.
If and when.
So
I thought it was getting ready for Shanghai.
Yes.
Or is it not? Okay.
Yes. So we could use this for storage. It we just need a place to advertise it. So the idea is that we don't need to keep an expiration for it, because each bundler can decide how far back it's going to look. It's going to start from the latest bundle and start going back. I mean, if it cannot reach the boot node and it starts looking for nodes trying to bootstrap from the chain, it will just take the latest bundle. If that doesn't work, it goes back. It starts going back until it finds a valid node, and from that node, it connects to the rest of the network. It starts at the usual discovery.
All right.
So it's no need for integration.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, the other, I'd request you all to take a look at the ENR structure that I currently. I mean, I'll push a new version, and if you have any comments on that, please do come back to me. I'll update the thing accordingly. Yeah, I think we are 3 minutes over. Does anybody else have anything else to raise?
No, I don't have anything else.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I request Jonas and Shahaf to take a look at the PR and come back if they have any comments. And then if both of you are happy, then Shahaf, I request you to merge that. I'll submit the new changes as a new PR request going forward.
Sure. I'll take a look at the PR, see that we addressed all the issues and all the comments, and yeah, I'll merge it, and I'll review the next PR as well.
Okay. So all of you are happy with this time for the meeting, right? So we'll meet again in 2 weeks. Do we want to set a defined agenda for the meeting, or we just leave it fluid for now because we're still in discovery phase?
I think that, yeah,
Go on.
I think that obviously if something comes up and you think we should talk about it, then we can start with an agenda. But yes, if something comes up during the conversation that we need to discuss, then if it's not in the agenda, we can still discuss it, of course.
Right.
Yeah, and I also want to take this opportunity to thank you again for taking this initiative and driving this forward. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
glad to
you.
be a part of this. Yov, can I also request you to ask Stokes for his comments? I did send him the PR request, but I'm not sure if he had a chance to look at it. He did say he'll look, but yeah, I'd appreciate any feedback from him as well.
Yeah, I sent it to him separately even before that, before I invited to the group,
Okay.
and I suggested that he takes a look. But he's probably busy. You know, all the client devs are in a workshop. I mean, they're in a workshop in Austria right now. So,
Oh, I see.
So I think he's probably busy with other things this week. But I
Yeah.
asked him.
Yeah, so any from the core devs, if they look at the P2P spec, because I don't want to make incorrect assumptions on certain aspect. I've been trying to actually test out the existing clients, see how they work before I include it into the spec. But I might have made some incorrect assumptions. So I'd appreciate any feedback on this front.
Okay, so I will ask.
All right, sounds good. All right, then. Thanks, everyone, for joining the call. I'll upload this to YouTube and share the transcript as soon as it's available for me. And we'll meet again in a couple of weeks. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. See
Bye.
you in
Thank
2
you.
weeks.
Bye-bye.
Right.